Nobody move, everyone on the ground. 6 armed robbers storm into Bella Vista, the city's most exclusive restaurant. Automatic weapons drawn, ski masks covering their faces. They've come for the night's cash receipts. Wealthy clientele means big money. But in the kitchen, head chef Marco doesn't hit the floor. He grabs his largest knife and walks toward the dining room. What happens next will turn fine dining into a massacre. You're about to witness what happens when the wrong criminals rob the wrong restaurant. Marco D'Angelo stands at his kitchen doorway, watching armed men terrorize his customers. 50 years old, 11 years at Bella Vista, the quietest chef in the city's restaurant scene. The robbers spread through the dining room, demanding wallets and jewelry from terrified diners. This should be easy. Upscale restaurant, wealthy victims, staff too scared to resist. Marco steps into the dining room with his knife. 38 seconds. That's all it takes to turn a robbery into a bloodbath. First robber never expects a chef's knife to become a combat blade. Marco's approach is surgical. One precise cut to the femoral artery. The gunman drops instantly, weapon clattering across marble floors as he bleeds out in seconds. Marco moves through his own restaurant like death in Chef White's. Every table, every aisle, every exit mapped in muscle memory from 11 years of service. But tonight, he's not serving food. Second robber spins toward the kitchen, firing wildly. But Marco has already vanished behind the wine rack, emerging with a carving knife that flies with deadly accuracy. Buried to the hilt in the gunman's throat. Third and fourth robbers realize they're not facing a chef anymore. They're being hunted by someone who understands anatomy better than any medical examiner. Marco melts back into his kitchen, using every piece of culinary equipment as a weapon. Meat cleaver becomes an axe. Boning knife becomes a stiletto. Even his mandolin slicer becomes an instrument of precise dismemberment. Fifth robber tries to escape through the kitchen's back door. Marco's waiting with a filleting knife that opens the man's carotid artery like preparing fresh salmon. Sixth robber, the leader, backs against the front window, firing desperately at shadows. But Marco has home field advantage in a place designed for precision cutting. The final attack comes from above. Marco drops from the mezzanine level, both hands holding kitchen shears that punch through tactical vest like it's made of paper. 6 armed robbers. 38 seconds. 0 survivors to describe what happened. Marco stands among the bodies, breathing normally, blood covering his white chef coat like a grotesque garnish. Like he just finished prep work instead of conducting culinary warfare. He walks to the host station, picks up the phone. 911? This is Marco D'Angelo at Bella Vista Restaurant. 6 armed individuals attempted robbery. Situation handled. Send paramedics for the customers. Some are in shock, as if he just dealt with a kitchen fire instead of a massacre. But this story didn't start 38 seconds ago. It started 15 years earlier. The day Staff Sergeant Marco D'Angelo, 75th Ranger Regiment, finished his final deployment and enrolled in culinary school. For 12 years, Marco had served as a ranger with specialized training in close-quarters combat and knife fighting. He'd eliminated high-value targets in environments where silence was essential and firearms were impractical. Marco's knife work wasn't learned in cooking school. It was perfected in classified operations where precision cutting meant the difference between mission success and international incidents. But 15 years ago, Marco had wanted peace, the satisfaction of creating meals instead of creating casualties. Honest work that fed people instead of eliminating them. Bella Vista offered that opportunity. For 11 years, Marco had been a perfect head chef, innovative, precise, never lost his temper. Created culinary masterpieces with knife skills that impressed food critics who never wondered why his cuts were so surgically exact. What they didn't know was that Marco's knife techniques came from military training that had nothing to do with food preparation. Until tonight. Back to the present. Police sirens wailing. SWAT teams securing the restaurant. 37 customers traumatized but alive. Restaurant owner Vincent Torino emerges from behind the bar where he'd hidden during the attack. "Marco," he says, staring at the carnage, "what have you done?" Marco removes his blood-soaked apron, revealing the Army Ranger's combat knife tattoo covering his left forearm. A detailed military blade design with Ranger stab clearly visible. "Protected our customers," Marco says simply. This wasn't protection, this was butchery. For 11 years, Marco has avoided this conversation. For 11 years, He successfully separated his Ranger knife fighting past from his culinary present. But there's no hiding now. Army Rangers, he says simply. 75th Regiment, close quarters combat specialist. The words hit the dining room like a grenade blast. Torino stares at the tattoo he'd somehow never noticed. You're telling me that for 11 years, I've had a Ranger knife fighter running my kitchen? Former Ranger, Marco corrects. I'm a chef now. I create instead of eliminate. Detective Sarah Chen arrives to investigate what appears to be the most unusual restaurant incident in the city's history. The 6 robbers are identified as members of a crew that had been targeting upscale establishments, using violence to terrorize victims into compliance. They'd researched Bella Vista's layout, customer patterns, and cash handling procedures. They'd planned for civilian resistance, security systems, and police response times. They hadn't planned for encountering someone whose knife skills were earned in combat zones. Chef D'Angelo, Detective Chen says, your response was unlike anything we've seen. Where did you learn to use kitchen knives for tactical purposes? Marco sharpens his knives with the same precision he'd used to eliminate threats. In the Rangers, you learn that every tool has multiple applications. Kitchen knives can prepare meals or protect the people eating them. Young sous chef Tommy approaches hesitantly. He'd worked under Marco for 3 years, never suspecting his mentor's background. Chef, how did you move so fast? How did you know exactly where to cut? Marco looks at the young cook who reminds him of himself years ago, passionate about food, unprepared for the reality that sometimes chefs must fight to protect their mission. In my previous job, I learned that precision is everything. Whether you're preparing beef Wellington or protecting innocent people, the techniques are the same. You cut exactly where you need to. 3 weeks later, Marco makes a decision that changes his career. He begins working with restaurant security companies, teaching culinary staff how to recognize threats and use kitchen equipment for protection. The work allows him to use his Ranger expertise without returning to military combat. He keeps his position at Bella Vista, but he no longer feels the need to completely separate his military experience from his culinary work. Word spreads through the restaurant industry. Bella Vista becomes known as the safest upscale restaurant in the city. Not because of security guards, but because everyone knows Chef Marco is watching the dining room.